There was a time when American backyards weren't just for mowing and grilling, they were survival systems, gardens that could feed a family through winter, features that saved money, and tricks that made neighbors jealous. But somewhere between fast food and suburban lawns, we lost these backyard secrets. Today, I'm revealing 15 garden features that were once in every American yard, but have completely vanished, and when you see what we gave up, you'll be shocked. Number 15. Cold frames, the poor man's greenhouse. Before expensive greenhouses, smart gardeners built cold frames from old windows and scrap wood. These simple boxes could turn a freezing February morning into a 70-degree paradise for lettuce and spinach. One cold frame could extend your growing season by months and start tomatoes weeks before your neighbors. The beauty was in their simplicity, just an angled window over a wooden box that trapped heat from the sun and protected plants from harsh winds. But here's the crazy part. They cost almost nothing to build and worked better than most modern solutions. Families would repurpose old storm windows and glass doors, creating mini greenhouses that could keep greens growing through winter. A well-built cold frame gave gardeners a serious head start on spring planting and often meant the difference between a good harvest and a great one. Yet today, you'd be lucky to find one in 1,000 backyards, even though they're still the smartest way to stretch a growing season. Number 14. Bean teepees, nature's playground. Kids today have $500 plastic playsets that break after a few seasons, but your grandparents built something better with 8 sticks and some beans. By midsummer, these living teepees became shady hideaways where children could play while runner beans climbed the poles, covering the structure with bright green leaves and dangling pods. Parents got free babysitting, kids learned where food came from, and the family got fresh beans all season long. The construction was beautifully simple, 7 or 8 tall poles tied together at the top with beans planted at the base. Within weeks, vigorous vines transformed the bare poles into a living playhouse that stayed cool even on the hottest days. Children would pick beans as part of their play, making harvest a game rather than a chore. It was genius, combining entertainment, education, and food production in one simple structure. But we decided plastic was better than nature, and these magical garden hideaways became a thing of the past. Number 13. Victory gardens, when America fed itself. During World War II, 20 million American families grew 40% of the nation's vegetables in their backyards. This wasn't just about patriotism, it was about survival and self-sufficiency. Entire neighborhoods became food production centers where families grew tomatoes, carrots, lettuce, and potatoes. Even city dwellers used rooftops and vacant lots to do their part. The movement was so massive that home gardens were producing more vegetables than commercial farms. But here's what's shocking. These weren't tiny hobby gardens. Families converted their entire lawns into food plots that could feed them year-round. They grew staples like potatoes and onions that could be stored through winter, ensuring food security when store-bought food was scarce or expensive. When the war ended, the habit stuck for a while. But as grocery stores expanded and processed foods became normal, we forgot that we could feed ourselves. Now we depend on food shipped thousands of miles instead of what we could grow in our own soil. Number 12. Rhubarb patches, the indestructible crop. Every old garden had a rhubarb patch tucked in some forgotten corner near the garage or fence line. These plants were absolutely bulletproof, surviving harsh winters that would kill most perennials, producing thick tart stalks perfect for pies and jams, and requiring almost zero care once established. Rhubarb was the ultimate set-it-and-forget-it crop that came back stronger every year. One patch could provide enough rhubarb for dozens of pies, and the plants just kept producing decade after decade. Some rhubarb patches are still producing after 50 years, testament to the plant's incredible durability and the wisdom of gardeners who understood the value of perennial food crops. Back in the day, rhubarb was a staple ingredient in homemade desserts, often paired with strawberries for that perfect sweet-tart combination that defines spring eating. But today's gardeners want instant results, so they skip the crop that takes a couple years to establish, but could feed their grandchildren. If you ever visit an old farmhouse, there's a good chance you'll spot a forgotten rhubarb patch still hanging on, proof that some things are built to last. Number 11. Companion planting, nature's pest control. Before chemical pesticides, gardeners used plant partnerships that actually worked better than anything you could spray. Marigolds protected tomatoes from bugs with their strong scent. Beans fed nitrogen to corn, while corn provided a natural trellis for the beans. Nasturtiums trapped aphids away from valuable vegetables, acting like living pest magnets. It was like having a natural pharmacy and pest control system built right into your garden design. The knowledge went deep. Experienced gardeners knew that carrots and onions grew well together because onions masked the carrot scent that attracted carrot flies. They understood that certain herbs attracted beneficial insects that preyed on garden pests. This wasn't just old wives' tales. It was thousands of years of plant wisdom that actually worked. But when chemicals promised easier solutions, we abandoned this natural protection system. Now we spray poisons that kill beneficial insects along with the pests, instead of using nature's own balanced approach that our grandparents mastered. Number 10. Root cellars, refrigeration without electricity. Before electric refrigerators, families stored vegetables in underground root cellars that stayed naturally cool year-round, typically maintaining temperatures between 32 and 40 degrees. Potatoes, carrots, onions, and apples could last 6 months without spoiling, and some cellars even had separate sections for different types of produce. These underground storage areas were insurance against hunger. Families with full root cellars never worried about having food through the winter months. The construction was both art and science, often dug into hillsides or built partially underground to take advantage of the earth's natural insulation. A well-designed root cellar had proper ventilation to prevent condensation and rot, different storage areas for different crops, and could preserve the harvest without any electricity or mechanical systems. When electricity became cheap and refrigeration reliable, we forgot how to store food without it. Now one power outage and our food spoils, but our grandparents had food security that didn't depend on the grid. Number 9. Grape arbors, edible shade structures. Smart families built wooden arbors covered in grapevines that provided shade, beauty, and fruit for decades. These weren't just decorative features, they were functional structures that got better with age. By midsummer, mature arbors were dripping with clusters of grapes perfect for eating fresh, making juice, or even trying your hand at winemaking. The dappled shade they provided made outdoor spaces comfortable during hot summer months, creating natural cooling that no artificial structure could match. The construction was built to last, often using cedar or other rot-resistant woods that could support the considerable weight of mature vines heavy with fruit. Families would place benches or tables underneath, creating cool retreats where they could shell peas, snap beans, or simply escape the heat. These living structures produced more fruit each year as the vines matured, providing decades of harvests from a single planting. But we replaced them with metal gazebos and plastic umbrellas that break after a few seasons and produce nothing but shade. Number 8. Asparagus beds, the 50-year investment. Asparagus takes 3 years to establish, but then produces for 50 years or more. Some old garden patches are still feeding families today. Your great-grandparents planted asparagus beds with the understanding that they were making an investment in their family's future. It was the ultimate long-term thinking. Plant once, harvest for life. The spring asparagus harvest was a celebrated event, with families checking their beds daily for the first tender spears that signaled winter was finally over. The establishment of an asparagus bed was considered serious business, requiring careful soil preparation and the patience to let plants develop strong root systems before harvesting significantly. But once established, these beds required little more than annual fertilizing and the discipline to stop harvesting in early summer so plants could build energy for next year's crop. Modern gardeners want results this season, so they skip the crop that could outlive them. It's a perfect example of how we've traded long-term abundance for short-term convenience. Number 7. Olla irrigation, ancient water wisdom. In the Southwest, smart gardeners buried unglazed clay pots, called ollas, with just the neck exposed, then filled them with water that slowly seeped through the porous clay directly to plant roots. No evaporation, no waste, no daily watering required. Plants stayed perfectly hydrated with minimal effort, and the slow, steady moisture delivery encouraged deep root growth that made plants more drought-resistant and healthier overall. This ancient technique was more efficient than modern sprinkler systems that lose much of their water to evaporation and often water leaves as much as roots. A single olla could keep plants healthy through dry spells that would otherwise require daily watering, making it perfect for arid regions where every drop counted. The system required almost zero maintenance once installed and worked entirely without electricity or mechanical parts. But we abandoned this brilliant water conservation method for automatic systems that waste water and require electricity to operate. Number 6. Cloches, individual plant protection. Before plastic row covers and garden fabric, gardeners protected seedlings with cloches, small, bell-shaped glass covers that worked like individual mini greenhouses. Each plant got its own perfect microclimate, shielded from frost, wind, and pests that could devastate young plants. Walking through a spring garden, you'd see rows of glass domes glistening in the sun, each one protecting precious seedlings from unpredictable weather. The traditional glass cloche was both functional and beautiful, trapping heat during the day and releasing it slowly at night to create temperatures several degrees warmer than the surrounding air. Resourceful gardeners made their own from cut-off glass jugs and bottles, turning trash into treasure that extended their growing season. The technique required daily attention, lifting or propping open the covers on warm days to prevent overheating, covering them with cloth during the coldest nights for extra insulation. But convenience culture killed the cloche because we'd rather plant late than give plants individual attention. Number 5, the stink bucket, liquid gold fertilizer. Hardcore gardeners made the most potent liquid fertilizer by rotting nettles, comfrey leaves, or fish scraps in water buckets for several weeks. The result smelled absolutely terrible, a combination of swamp gas and rotting vegetation that could clear a garden shed, but it worked like magic on plants. This homemade brew was packed with nutrients that plants could absorb immediately, creating growth that was nothing short of spectacular. Plants fed with stink bucket fertilizer grew enormous and incredibly productive, with tomatoes reaching massive sizes and leafy greens becoming deep green and lush. The process was beautifully simple. Stuff nitrogen-rich plant material into a bucket, cover with water, and let beneficial bacteria do the work. After 3 to 4 weeks, the liquid was strained and diluted before application. It was free, organic, and more effective than anything you could buy. But modern gardeners chose convenience over results, trading this powerful homemade fertilizer for expensive store-bought bottles that promise similar results without the smell or effort. Number 4, onion braids, edible art. After harvest, onions weren't tossed into plastic bags. They were carefully braided into beautiful ropes that hung in kitchens and pantries like functional artwork. These braids weren't just storage. They were symbols of food security and self-sufficiency. A well-made braid could preserve onions for 6 months without refrigeration, the braiding keeping them separated so that if one went bad, it wouldn't contaminate the others. The art of onion braiding was passed down through generations, usually from mother to daughter, as part of essential household skills. The process required timing. Onions had to be harvested when the tops were beginning to dry but still pliable enough to work with. The braiding itself was meditative work. often done in the evening when the day's garden tasks were finished. A good onion braid was a point of pride and a visual reminder that the garden had provided well. But we traded this beautiful, functional tradition for plastic mesh bags that make onions rot in weeks instead of months. Number 3, strawberry patches, self-expanding food systems. Old strawberry patches were like magic. They spread naturally through runners, creating more plants and more fruit each year without any additional planting. These weren't the giant, flavorless berries from grocery stores that are bred for shipping and shelf life. They were small, intensely sweet gems that exploded with flavor, packed with a kind of taste that modern strawberries simply can't match. The spreading habit that modern gardeners see as a problem was actually a feature that provided endless strawberries with minimal effort. One patch could provide strawberries for decades with minimal care, the plant sending out runners that rooted wherever they touched the ground. For older generations, this self-perpetuating nature meant food security that got better every year. Children learned to pick the perfectly ripe berries in the cool morning hours, making harvest a family activity that taught kids where food came from. But we chose convenience over flavor, buying expensive berries shipped from thousands of miles away instead of growing our own patches that could feed families for generations. Number 2, herb drying, the original spice rack. When herbs like thyme, oregano, sage, and rosemary were ready for preservation, families bundled them and hung them upside down from rafters or string lines like aromatic chandeliers. The smell was incredible. Kitchens and mudrooms became natural apothecaries where the air itself seemed to have healing properties. Different herbs contributed their own notes: the sharp scent of rosemary, the warm earthiness of oregano, the medicinal intensity of sage. The bunches dried slowly over several weeks, concentrating their flavors while the leaves gradually lost moisture. Once properly dried, the herbs were carefully removed from stems and stored in glass jars, labeled and dated for future use. Each jar represented a specific harvest and carried the story of that year's garden: the weather conditions, the timing of the harvest, the care taken in preservation. But we traded this connection to our food for expensive store-bought herbs that sit on supermarket shelves for years, losing potency and flavor while we forgot the satisfaction of preserving our own harvest. Number 1, garden sharing, the original food network. The best part of old-school gardening wasn't what you grew, it was what you shared. When tomato plants exploded with fruit in August, you didn't let the extras rot on the vine. You packed up baskets and brought them to neighbors, creating bonds of reciprocity that strengthened entire communities. It wasn't uncommon for people to leave bags of zucchini on porches with handwritten notes, trade cucumbers for eggs with the neighbor who kept chickens, or swap canning jars filled with homemade preserves. This sharing created informal but powerful food security networks where everyone had access to fresh vegetables regardless of their own garden success. Communities were stronger because neighbors knew each other and looked out for one another. Children learned the value of generosity by helping carry baskets to neighbors and understanding that abundance was meant to be shared, not hoarded. The tradition encouraged diversity in gardening. Families might specialize in growing certain crops particularly well, knowing they could trade with neighbors for variety. Today, we post pictures of our harvests online for likes and comments, but we've lost the physical connections that made neighborhoods feel like extended families and ensured no one went hungry when gardens were abundant. These 15 forgotten features prove our grandparents built gardens that were smarter, more productive, and more connected to community than anything we have today. They understood that gardens weren't just about plants, they were about survival, self-sufficiency, and taking care of each other. Subscribe to discover more lost wisdom that could transform your backyard, and check out the next video to see what other secrets we've forgotten.